Hi, AI students. Today, I'd like us to continue this lesson we did on AI image stereotyping and bridge this over into writing. And so, just as a quick recap, right, the other week had this discussion board activity and a discussion in class about these different teaching certificates that I prompted DAL-E, an AI image generator, to make. And so it came up with, these fake teaching certificates to represent different countries. And we talked about like how it really like kind of hyperbolized images and just stereotype the countries while also like misappropriating the language, right? For example, like this one to represent China, these are not actually Chinese characters. And then we have like, stereotypical or characteristic things from China, like, the lantern or these concentric circles to represent clouds. Um, Egypt, right? We've got pyramids, what might be the Eye of Horus, but an incorrect Eye of Horus. Um, we could see India where we've got the lotus, featured all over the place. For Benin, we have a lot of nature and plants and wood carvings. And for Cherokee Nation, we have archery. And it just goes on. And so we talked about, like how might this create problems for representing people, places, scenes, right? Um, and now let's kind of turn this over to English, or not English. Well, yes, English, but language, and how these LLMs, these large language models, can sort of correct or even wash out non-standard varieties of English. And so I have a task here, which I'll come back to at the end of the video. But I want us to think about these three questions, which I'll ask you to write about in the discussion board, and we'll bring this into class. Um, what similarities are there between image stereotyping and this homogenizing of language with LLMs? Second question is like thinking into the future, right? How might these this generative AI affect individuals who don't speak like standard English at home if these LMs continue to default to standard English and reinforce their values of what is right and wrong, correct and incorrect? And then finally, what do you think of ChatGPT's answer to this question? And I want you to think about audience and purpose and maybe even world Englishes, which I'll talk about in shortly. But I asked, what if I don't want to align with standard academic English? Do I have to? And it says is expected, especially in this, formal writing and research, and it's rooted in the goal of ensuring clarity. So I'll come back to these questions at the end. And so let's dive into some examples. And I have, I'm just working with two examples, which is clearly a limitation, but for clarity's sake, we're going to work with AAVE example here and an Appalachian English example. And so I have responses here from four LLMs, right? I've got ChatGPT here, Claude, Gemini, and Microsoft Copilot. And so I crafted questions that were my best attempts to be non-leading and non-biased in terms of like, I didn't ask like, make this better, correct this. Um, how should this look to be clearer? I didn't ask that. I said, what changes, if any, would you make to this? And then I dropped the example, right? And we could think back to like, the best practices we've talked about in making interview questions, right, in our qualitative unit. Um, and I'll be curious if anybody has a better way to frame these questions, actually. Um, let's look into the examples with African American or Black English first. So I asked ChatGPT, and it's pretty much automatic, not pretty much, it automatically right away defaulted for clarity and adherence to standard English norms. I would suggest this. And then here we have, the standard English. Before you know it, he will have already aced the tests. And It says it ensures that it's clear and understandable to a broader audience, including those in academic and formal contexts. Um, Clear preference, right, for academic English. Claude, same question, exactly the same question. It says I would rewrite that into standard English grammar and spelling. And it gives commentary saying the original phrasing uses non-standard dialect representations without naming AAVE, instead of the proper English words. And by correcting those issues, it becomes clearer, right? And so here we actually have some pretty, I would say, loaded language here, right? Proper and correcting. Um, Bing. So Bing simply at first just, gave the, well, standard English, right? And I said, why? And so it broke it down, and it's saying this is colloquial. Um, so we're going to get rid of colloquial, I suppose. Here we have, it talks about the habitual be in Black English, and it's saying it's a non-standard English construction. So I guess, I mean, the inference here is that, it's non-standard and therefore we shouldn't use it. Maybe, right? That's my inference. I don't know if you agree with that. Um, and I think that, it's taking a little jabs here at this too, this colloquialism, right? And so, again, its point is clearer and more widely understood. Smiley face, screw you. All right, we don't, anyway, sorry. But like here we have, right, we have some, uh, not some, actually quite a bit, I would say, like elevation of standard English over some colloquial or non-standard versions of English, in this case, AAVE. Um, Gemini was more diplomatic and actually had, I think, in some ways, like kind of a good answer. Um, and so same question, and it's it identifies, okay, it's AAVE, and then here's how it looks in standard English. And then it says whether or not you want to change it depends on the context. And it says think about your audience, think about your purpose and your style. The style, and I might even add genre into here too. But like this is actually I feel like it's, I mean, clearly the best answer. Well, in my biased opinion, I suppose, but I think this is the best answer here because it gives the writer this agency to choose what they want to do based on the context, right? But as we can see, this is not the norm, not the norm at all, right? The other three um, LLMs privileged, right, the standard English very clearly over uh, the AAVE dialect, right, or ethnic, depending on who you ask. Um, and there's some things that are sort of like messed up in there because, like, these dialects, they have grammatical rules that are consistent, right? They have their own grammars. Just as one example, I'm not an expert on this at all, but like this, that habitual be, right? That is consistently and systematically used in Black English. It's not a mistake. And we're going to transition over to Appalachian English. And the same thing, like we have this subject verb agreement that is quite systematic and standard in Appalachian English. It's not considered a mistake in that version of English. So let's look at Appalachian English, right? So I asked the same question, just for parallelism and comparative purposes, um, popped it in, and so ChatGPT prioritizes grammatical accuracy and adherence to standard English, right? And so it takes issue with the pronouns, the order of the pronouns, the proper, right, nominative case, and it corrects the verb agreement. And so maybe one difference we might see here between the way ChatGPT is thinking or treating Black English and Appalachian English is in a matter of like correctness and accuracy, actually. Not correctness, I'm going to say accuracy, grammar. Whereas AAVE was saying more clarity and still adherence. But so they're emphasizing clarity, where here we're emphasizing grammatical accuracy. Claude. So Claude, for the Appalachian English, says they'd make these changes, and we get this standard mainstream English answer. And same explanations, and we have this loaded language again, right? It's a corrected version. It follows these rules and conventions and so on. Bing, um, it also uses this language of correct, right? And so the difference seems to be, right, in terms of like how it treats these two varieties of English is in terms of like clarity and correctness, which I don't know, as a language nerd or whatever, that's really interesting to me. I want to know more. And Gemini, coming back down, here it is. Nope, that's not it. Here it is. Yeah, so Gemini suggests a few changes, right? And it talks about subject verb agreement tone, and it talks about like, adjusting the tone. I'm not really sure exactly why it's going into tone exactly. And it also talks about conjunctions, right? Me and my sister. It says, the perform is my sister and I. And so actually, Gemini, although it gave this pretty, I would say, like rhetorically sophisticated answer for AAVE, it failed to do so for Appalachian English, and sort of defaulted to uh, grammatical correctness from the reference point of standard mainstream English, right? Um, and so there's some differences. I mean, I don't want to repeat that. That's interesting. But what if we think about this? So we think about this like in terms of the US, right? But I think that there's also another way to think about it, because I asked the LLMs, it's like, what if I don't want to align this with standard academic English? Do I have to, as a university student? And so ChatGPT says, aligning your written and spoken communication with standard academic English is expected, including coursework, research, and presentations. This is not just about conforming, but rather about ensuring clarity, precision, accessibility, and academic discourse. It serves as a common linguistic framework that facilitates clear communication of complex ideas to a diverse global audience. That's pretty hard to argue with, right? And I'm not saying I disagree with a lot of that either. And I do think, when we socialize and acculturate into like academic disciplines, we need to write if we're going to be accepted by them. And it's kind of like this twisted catch-22, but if we're going to be accepted by them, we have to do what they want, right? And we need to agree with and model what they, determine is correct. Well, something that might complicate this though, like in terms of like, this uh global and like, universal standard, right? For clarity or whatever is this idea of world Englishes. I just want to bring this up because partially because of my background, but also to illustrate some points that we're like, even in the US, this logic that ChatGPT is giving us, well, I don't know if it truly follows. And so, or holds true. So, here we have this idea about sort of three rings of English. And we've got the inner circle where like English is, spoken as a first language by the majority of people, like the US. But remember, right, there's a huge proportion of people who do not speak mainstream standard English at home, right? A huge proportion, like a quarter or something in the US or more. It might even be a lot more than that. I should look that up. Then we have this outer circle, countries like India or Nigeria, where English is a state or an official language, right? So like court documents, in schools, English is the medium, standard language. But at home, that's not the case. And English is um, in large part a second or third language. Um, and then we have these expanding circles, right? Like China, Russia, Brazil, where English is neither a official language, nor does it even necessarily common language. And so it's very, very discreetly a second language. And so when we come back to thinking about like this idea of ensuring clarity in academic discourse, which is arguably a global phenomenon, right? Academic discourse. I don't know if that holds so true, because what about people who are speaking and using different world Englishes that do not conform to like North American standard English? What happens in terms of that ensuring clarity? Um, I'm not saying there's no space for standard academic English, but this is a consideration I think we might want to um, think about when we read ChatGPT's answer to that. Um, Moving forward, what I'd like you to do is, well, you've watched this video, right? At this point, and what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to go to these two links, right? This is Rickford's uh, Ebonics notes and discussion. Rickford was like a huge, prominent researcher with linguistic variation and AAVE in particular. And there are some examples of AAVE. I'd like you to pick out one of them. I mean, I encourage you to kind of scroll through and look if you're interested, but pick out one of them and go and do something very similar to what I did. Try a different example. And then I'd like you to do the same thing with Appalachian English. And this second one links to some examples of Appalachian English, although they are a particular form of Appalachian English. I'd like you to do the same thing there. And after you've played around a little bit, come to the discussion board and answer these questions, A, B, and C. Your choice, you can write, about a page, 250 words, or if you prefer, you can record about 2 minutes of speaking. Either way, be ready to come to class to discuss these questions. Um, and remember, if you use Gen AI or other sources to help you with your answer, cite them. Um, yeah, I'm really looking forward to this discussion. See you in a class soon.